Most mornings begin so quietly that they almost disappear before you notice them. The first light settles across the grass. A thin ribbon of mist lingers above the yard. Somewhere beyond the fence, a robin offers a single note, then another, until the silence begins to breathe. You glance toward a shallow puddle left behind by last night's rain, expecting nothing more than a familiar scene. Then, a tiny songbird drops from an overhanging branch. It doesn't drink. It doesn't search for food. Instead, it steps into the water and suddenly throws itself into it with surprising urgency, sending silver droplets flashing through the cool morning air. For a few seconds, everything else seems to stop. The wind softens. The leaves barely move. Even the distant chorus of birds feels quieter, as though this small ritual deserves its own moment of stillness. When the bird climbs back onto a nearby branch, it doesn't fly away. It remains perfectly still, turning slowly into the rising sunlight while each feather catches a pale golden glow. It looks less like a creature cleaning itself, and more like one preparing for something you cannot quite see. If you're new here, subscribe before you leave, because what you're about to discover may forever change the way you look at every bird that visits your backyard. Some of nature's greatest secrets never hide in distant forests or untouched mountains. They unfold a few feet from your window, waiting for someone willing to look a little longer. But that is only where this story begins, because the strange part isn't that birds bathe. The strange part is why they seem to treat those few quiet moments as if everything that follows somehow depends on them. You have probably seen that same little moment more times than you can remember. A bird lands beside a puddle after a spring shower. Another slips into the edge of a shallow bird bath on a warm afternoon. Tiny wings scatter droplets into the air, and before long you smile, quietly deciding that it simply wanted to cool off or wash away a little dust. Most of us never think beyond that. We carry on with the day, believing we have already understood what we witnessed. Yet something about those moments has a way of staying with you. Perhaps it is how completely focused the bird becomes. Perhaps it is the strange patience that follows, when it settles onto a nearby branch without making a sound, as though the morning itself has slowed down. You know that feeling. You catch yourself watching for just a few seconds longer than you intended. You cannot explain why, but it no longer feels like an ordinary routine. It feels deliberate, almost meaningful. There is something deeply familiar about that quiet curiosity. We all experience moments when nature asks us to pause without ever speaking a word. A shaft of sunlight through moving leaves. A single feather drifting across an empty yard. The sudden hush that arrives before the breeze changes direction. None of these moments demand an explanation. They simply invite your attention. And perhaps that is why this small ritual feels different every time you see it. Not because it is rare, but because some part of you quietly senses there is more happening than your eyes alone can recognize. But what happens next begins to reveal a hidden layer that most people walk past every single day without ever realizing it is there. The hidden layer begins to appear only when you stop watching the water and start watching the bird itself. Notice how it never splashes carelessly. It lowers its body with intention, shakes its wings in short, rapid bursts, then pauses for a heartbeat before beginning again. Every movement seems measured, almost practiced, as though it has repeated the same quiet sequence thousands of times before. Then comes the part most people overlook. The bird leaves the water long before it looks finished. It hops onto a sunlit branch, lifts one wing, then the other, gently drawing each feather through its bill with extraordinary precision. It lingers there in complete silence while the morning light slowly reaches deeper into the tree. From a distance, it appears to be resting. But if you stay with the moment, something feels different. It is not resting at all. It is continuing a ritual that began the instant its feet touched the water. There is something profoundly humbling about realizing that an ordinary backyard songbird carries out this quiet routine whether anyone is watching or not. It does not perform for us. It is answering a need written deep within its own existence. That realization changes the feeling of the entire scene. What looked like a simple bath begins to resemble the careful maintenance of something incredibly delicate. A system so refined that almost every movement matters. And perhaps that is why these moments often leave us with a feeling we cannot quite name. We sense there is an order unfolding in front of us, one that has existed long before we arrived and will continue long after we have gone. But what that hidden routine is truly accomplishing remains even more remarkable than the ritual itself, and that is where the story quietly turns in a direction few people ever expect. Researchers who spend years observing wild songbirds often describe their feathers in a way that surprises people. They do not speak of them as decoration, they speak of them as engineering. A single feather weighs almost nothing, yet together they form a structure so precise that even the slightest change in alignment can affect how a bird moves through the air. That is why the quiet ritual you have been watching does not end at the water's edge. The droplets loosen dust too small for the eye to notice and help prepare each feather for what comes next. Then, with slow and careful movements, the bird draws every feather through its bill, spreading a nearly invisible layer of natural oil produced near the base of its tail. It is a remarkably simple act, but one that helps keep the feathers flexible, water-resistant, and properly locked together. There is something deeply moving about that. Survival, at least for a tiny songbird, is not built from dramatic moments. It is built from countless small acts of quiet care repeated every single day. Perhaps that is why the morning scene feels so strangely peaceful. Without realizing it, you are watching a living system preserve itself with extraordinary patience. Every pause on the branch, every careful turn of the head, every feather slipping gently through the bill is part of a design refined over countless generations. The science does not diminish the wonder. If anything, it makes the moment feel even more extraordinary. Because what appears effortless is actually the result of remarkable precision unfolding in complete silence. And yet, even this careful routine is only preparing the bird for something more important, because the greatest benefit of all does not happen in the water or even on the branch. It reveals itself only after the bird returns to the sky. The next time the little songbird lifts from the branch, it is almost impossible to notice anything has changed. There is no dramatic transformation, no visible signal. It simply slips into the morning air with quiet confidence, weaving between branches, rising above the fence, then disappearing beyond the maple as though it had always belonged there. Yet once you have watched the moments before that flight, it becomes difficult to separate one from the other. The ritual and the journey begin to feel inseparable. If you spend enough mornings in the same place, you begin recognizing familiar visitors. A chickadee returning to the same twig before sunrise. A finch choosing the very edge of the bird bath each afternoon. A sparrow lingering beneath the same patch of shade while the light shifts across the lawn. Slowly, without realizing it, their routines become part of yours. You glance toward the water before pouring your first cup of coffee. You notice when the branch is empty. You wonder why the morning feels quieter on the days they do not appear. That quiet attachment is something many people never expect. We often imagine that we are observing birds, but over time it feels more like we are sharing a rhythm with them. Their small habits begin marking the hours of our own lives. There is something comforting about that. Something that gently reminds us the natural world is not separate from our everyday routine. It has been unfolding beside us all along. And perhaps that is why the bird's careful preparation feels strangely personal. Once you begin seeing the purpose hidden inside those ordinary moments, you cannot help but hope tomorrow morning will bring the same familiar flutter of wings, the same tiny circle of rippling water, and another quiet reminder that even the smallest lives are sustained by rituals almost too delicate for us to notice. Then, almost without warning, the scale of what you are witnessing begins to change. It is no longer only about one bird beside one puddle on one quiet morning. The same careful sequence is unfolding in backyards, forests, city parks, creek beds, and hidden woodland pools across the continent. As the first light reaches the trees, countless songbirds are performing nearly identical movements, each one following an ancient rhythm without a signal, without instruction, without hesitation. There is something quietly astonishing about that thought. A world most of us never notice is already awake, preparing itself before our own day has truly begun. You begin to realize that the shallow bird bath outside your window is not simply a source of water. It is part of a much larger network of places where survival begins long before the first flight of the morning. The little bird that seemed so ordinary now feels connected to something far greater than itself. Every feather it patiently aligns will soon meet moving air. Every tiny adjustment will influence the invisible balance between lift, warmth, rain, and distance. The preparation lasts only minutes, yet its effects may carry the bird through miles of flight before the sun reaches its highest point. Perhaps that is why these quiet rituals have such an unexpected emotional weight. They remind us that nature rarely separates the ordinary from the extraordinary. The extraordinary is simply hidden inside the ordinary until someone slows down enough to notice. But even now, one essential piece of the story remains concealed. The water, the sunlight, and the careful grooming are only the beginning. The greatest advantage reveals itself, not while the bird is standing still, but during the countless moments afterward when it moves through the world with a precision that almost no human eye can fully appreciate. As the days pass, it becomes difficult to see that little morning ritual in quite the same way again. You begin noticing that it happens with remarkable consistency, not only after rain, but whenever the conditions seem just right. The light reaches the branches. The air feels calm. The water lies perfectly still. Then another bird arrives, and another, each one following a sequence that appears almost instinctive yet somehow deeply intentional. Many people believe that moments like these remind us of something we have forgotten about the natural world. Not because the birds are sending messages in any supernatural sense, but because they live with a level of quiet awareness that we rarely allow ourselves to experience. They respond to the morning exactly as it is, without distraction, without hurry, completely present in the task before them. There is something about that which feels difficult to ignore. Perhaps the feeling does not come from the birds alone. Perhaps it comes from recognizing how much meaning can exist inside an ordinary moment once we stop rushing past it. Researchers can explain the biology behind the feathers, the oils, and the remarkable efficiency of flight. Those explanations are real, and they deepen our appreciation. Yet they do not fully replace the quiet emotion that settles over you as you watch a tiny songbird standing motionless in the first sunlight of the day. Somehow both truths can exist together. Science tells us how the ritual works. Reflection reminds us why it moves us. And somewhere between those two perspectives, a simple backyard scene becomes something that lingers in the mind long after the bird has disappeared beyond the trees. But there is still one final realization waiting, one that may quietly change the way you look at every patch of water, every familiar branch, and every small bird that returns tomorrow morning. The following morning, almost without thinking, you find yourself looking toward the water before you look anywhere else. The bird bath is still. A faint breeze moves through the maple leaves, carrying the quiet sound of waking branches. Then, as if the morning has remembered its place, a small songbird arrives once again. This time, nothing about the scene feels ordinary. You are no longer watching a bird simply passing through your yard. You are witnessing a rhythm that has likely repeated itself every morning for longer than any human memory could follow. The water reflects the pale sky. Tiny circles spread across its surface before disappearing into perfect stillness again. A single feather catches the light for just a moment, then settles back into place. The bird lifts its head, pauses, and listens to a world that seems impossibly calm. In that silence, something inside you grows quieter as well. It becomes easier to understand why so many meaningful moments in nature arrive without announcing themselves. They ask for nothing except your attention. They do not compete with the noise of the day. They simply wait until someone is willing to notice. Perhaps that is the greatest gift these small morning rituals offer. Not an answer, not a hidden message. Simply an invitation to slow down enough to see life unfolding exactly as it has for countless generations. The extraordinary was never hidden behind distance or rarity. It was hidden inside repetition, inside patience, inside the gentle movements of a creature no larger than the palm of your hand. And for a brief moment, standing there in the quiet light, it almost feels as though you have stepped into the rhythm of that older world, if only for a few peaceful breaths. Eventually, the morning becomes brighter, and the little songbird disappears beyond the trees just as quietly as it arrived. The ripples fade. The branch sways once, then grows still again. Nothing extraordinary seems to remain. And yet, something has changed. Not in the bird, but in the way you will remember this moment. From now on, every shallow puddle after a summer rain, every quiet bird bath catching the first light, every tiny bird pausing beneath the warmth of the morning sun may feel just a little different. You will know that beneath those ordinary movements lives a remarkable story of patience, preparation, and resilience. Perhaps that is one of nature's gentlest lessons. The most important acts of survival are often the ones no one applauds because they happen in silence, repeated faithfully day after day until they become almost invisible. Many people spend their lives searching for wonder somewhere far away, while all along it has been unfolding a few steps outside the back door. Whether you see these quiet rituals as remarkable biology, as a reminder to slow down, or simply as one more reason to appreciate the living world around you, Something about them has a way of staying with you. Maybe that is enough. Thank you for staying with me until the very end and sharing these quiet moments together. If stories like this help you see the natural world with fresh eyes, I hope you will subscribe before you leave, because there are still countless wonders waiting just beyond the edge of everyday life, and most of them are happening while the rest of us are looking somewhere else. And perhaps, somewhere outside your window tomorrow morning, a small songbird will step into the water once again. Maybe it is only another ordinary beginning, but somehow, after today, it may never feel like only that again.